Happy Mother's Day. It's always a good day to stand trembling before you because I have to give moms advice on how to be a better mom, right? Not really. Actually, today, the thing I want to share with you is maybe the most simple message I've ever shared. And while it's simple, it's going to take me a long time to get there. So I'm going to talk fast so I don't keep you longer. How's that sound? Mother's Day. So a few weeks ago, I had the opportunity to fly back to Ohio and spend a little time with my mom. And I've shared a little bit about how, her health is, and she's struggling physically right now. And so it was good to be home and spend some time with my mom. And while I was there, I started thinking about what my mom has taught me over the years. What was it that she shared that has really impacted me? And think about that for yourself. What did your mom teach you? One of the things that she taught me was honesty. I mean, honesty. My mom is so honest. She's honest to a fault. And she taught me that if I wasn't honest to a fault, I'd pay a price. Honesty. And she also taught me that her faith isn't just a part of her life, it is her life. A lot of people, as they go through life, their faith is an element of their life. Well, for her, for my mom, the core element of her life is her faith. And so I learned that from her. But growing up as a little kid, one of the rules was clean your plate. Did any of you have that rule when you were a kid? Yeah, your mom says, clean your plate. And the thing that was unfair about that rule was this. She got to determine the serving size of the food. And so she might slap down a bunch of cooked carrots. Ugh. I mean, I would try to eat those, and I would gag. I mean, I still, to this day, I love raw carrots, but a cooked carrot, ugh. You're like, you haven't tried my cooked carrots. I'm not gonna. I would gag with cooked carrots. There was just something about it. And so the rule was clean your plate. And so I would sit there, and dinner is over, and everybody's excused from the table except for me sitting there. I'm not going to eat my carrots. And so I'd sit there, and sometimes an hour would go by. And I'd take my fork, and I'd try to spread them out on the plate to make it look like I ate some or something like that. She never fell for that one. And sometimes I would gather them up and take them off the plate and throw them in a plant or something. We had a plant near the table, and I'd put them in the plant thinking I'd come back. Honesty. Remember what I said about not being honest with your mom? That's a hard lesson. And so, clean your plate, that was the rule. So I got to go back and spend a little bit of time with my parents and my mom. Things have changed a little. Her appetite isn't what it used to be. And so she'll take 3-4 bites of food, and then she'll say, I'm full. Let's have dessert. Okay, first of all, we never had dessert at every meal when I was a kid growing up, but I'm full. So I'm full means I'm full. It doesn't mean there's room for dessert. And I said, how can you be full and have room? And you didn't even clean your plate. You didn't clean your plate. You can't have dessert. And she'd smile and nod, yes, I can. What? And so here's what I learned recently from my mom. You can't tell your mom what to do. You can't. You can try. It doesn't work. You can't do it. And when you get to a certain stage in life, you get to make up the rules. Doesn't matter. You get to change the rules, make them up, clean your plate. Nope, threw that rule out a long time ago. Oh, well. One of the 10 commandments that God gave the Israelites was this from Exodus 20, verse 12. God said to the Israelites, he said, honor your father and mother, then you will live a long, full life in the land the Lord your God is giving you. This passage, when I read this when I was young, I used to think, this means obey your parents. Be obedient, do what they tell you to do. And there is an element to that. But as time has gone by, I've kind of learned that there's more there than that. In fact, the Hebrew for obey or honor, the Hebrew for honor means this, to give weight to to your parents, to give them weight in your life, to grant them an extra measure of authority, an extra measure of respect, to appreciate them, to place them in a place of greater importance for us. So we have to remember, the Hebrews were coming out of hundreds of years of slavery. And so God is trying to help them understand this is what it looks like to be a people of God, to be human and love your God and follow your God. And so one of the rules he gives them, honor your father and mother. Then you will live a long, full life in the land your God has given you. Why that one? Why honor your father and mother? Well, that's part of what it looks like to be a people, to set up a foundation, to have a community, is to honor your father and mother. And so as time has passed, these people that are learning to love God, what does it look like today for us? If you are blessed enough to live in your parents' age and you get to see them age, if you're blessed enough to live with your parents long enough, we honor our parents by, on Thursday, our group met by taking care of them. Was one of the men suggested. That's how you honor your parents. You take care of them. You check in on them. You honor them by checking in and taking care of them. You honor them by protecting their dignity. You know, aging is one of those funny things. There's nothing dignified about it, but you can protect the dignity of your parents. You honor them by hearing their story, because hearing their story matters, because that is in effect your story. And so as you listen to them tell their story, it's building a foundation for us. You honor them by serving them. You honor them by allowing them freedom to choose, even when you would choose something different for them. That's funny. That's what they did for me when I was a kid, except for the carrots, right? You honor them by not dishonoring their name. So Mother's Day is a tough day to talk for a lot of reasons. One, I'm not going to tell you moms, here's what you do to be a better mom. I'm not going to do that. And I also know there's a lot of pain and a lot of oddness about Mother's Day. Whether you're a mom, you've always wanted to be a mom, you have a mom, your mom passed away. There's all of that stuff and more. And so today, what we're going to do is just take a few minutes, and we're going to look at an incredibly dysfunctional family and a tremendous mom. An incredibly dysfunctional family and a tremendous mom. And how this tremendous mom navigated the situation she found herself in. And we're going to be in the book of Genesis today, chapter 16. God had promised Abram, I will make you into a great nation, and you will have descendants, as many descendants as there are stars in the sky. By the way, did any of you see the stars? Not the stars. How about the northern lights the other day? How incredible. Did you? Did anybody get out and see that? Really? Oh, you missed out. But I won't tell you that. Anyway, I will give you as many descendants as there are sands on the seashore. And then time passed. And 4 chapters of the Bible go by. And now we find ourselves in Genesis 16, and we find this playing out for Abram. Now, Sarai, Abram's wife, had not been able to bear children for him, but she had an Egyptian servant named Hagar. So Sarai said to Abram, the Lord has prevented me from having children. Go and sleep with my servant. Perhaps I can have children through her. And Abram agreed with Sarai's proposal. So Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, the Egyptian servant, and gave her to Abram as a wife. This happened 10 years after Abram had settled in the land of Canaan. So Abram had sexual relations with Hagar, and she became pregnant. But when Hagar knew she was pregnant, she began to treat her mistress, Sarai, with contempt. Then Sarai said to Abram, this is all your fault. This is all your fault. I put my servant in your arms. But now that she's pregnant, she treats me with contempt. The Lord will show who's wrong, you or me." Abram replied, "Look, she's your servant, so deal with her as you see fit." Then Sarai treated Hagar so harshly that she finally ran away. Now, in this text, I am tempted to defend Abram. I'm just tempted to. The poor guy. I mean, he was minding his own business. And Sarai is like, "Here, I can't have children, so take my maidservant and marry her, and I will raise her children as if they are my own children." And so, poor guy, he reluctantly agrees. Well, we don't know that part. But the plan worked. The plan worked, and Hagar, the maidservant, is now pregnant. But she begins to treat her mistress, her master, because she's a slave, she begins to treat her with contempt. It's not lost on us that Hagar does not have a choice in the matter. Hagar's a slave from Egypt. She has no choice. And when Sarai says, "I want you to marry my husband and be his wife," she didn't ask for that. That wasn't her choice. In fact, I'm going to import some of my own Western civilization values and sensibilities and say she wouldn't have chosen that. She would have rather chosen her own husband, rather chosen her own place, and raised her own family in her own community. But instead, I'm importing these ideas. Well, Western values, they didn't even exist back then. So she's a slave in a foreign land. "Here, take Abram, sleep with him." And Sarai, she is looking for a surrogate mother. She's looking to take Hagar's son and raise him as if he's her own. And she becomes pregnant, and she despises Sarai. Sarai notices the change in her servant, and she begins to treat her badly. And she's angry. She's angry because, well, let's guess why she's angry. She couldn't have a child. God had promised this. She's so frustrated she couldn't have a child. It's not working. And so she comes up with a plan, and the plan backfires on her. And who's to blame? Him. Right? It's his fault. She began to despise Hagar and treat her so badly that Hagar ran for her life. She ran off into the desert. A pregnant woman ran off into the desert all by herself. Now we come to Genesis 16, verse 7. The angel of the Lord found Hagar beside a spring of water in the wilderness along the road to Shur. The angel said to her, "Hagar, Sarai's servant, where have you come from? Where are you going?" "I'm running away from my mistress, Sarai," she replied. The angel of the Lord said to her, "Return to your mistress and submit to her authority." Then he added, "I will give you more descendants than you can count." God's message to Hagar: go back and submit to your master. Endure suffering for a while. And if you do, I will bless you beyond your wildest imagination. You will have descendants that you can't even comprehend. But you have to go back and suffer for a while. Verse 15 of Genesis 16. So Hagar gave Abram a son, and Abram named him Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Ishmael was born. This is messy, right? This is so incredibly messy. Abram is so cowardly. Am I supposed to say that? But how cowardly? Treat her however you want to treat her. Instead of standing up for her, he says, "Yeah, treat her however you want." He doesn't want to take Sarai's wrath, and so he says, "Treat her however you want." Hagar, Sarai is awful. She is awful. She came up with a plan, and then she is awful about it. And the only one who obeyed God in this whole situation is Hagar the Egyptian. who doesn't even really know God, as far as we can tell. But God knew her. Don't hear what I'm not saying. I want to be real careful right now. Don't hear what I'm not saying. But do hear what I am saying. That makes sense? What can we learn? Obey God even when you want to run. Obey God. Now, again, don't hear what I'm not saying because I'm going to be there in just a second. Obey God and don't run even when you want to run. Even when there's suffering involved. Obey God. And if God says don't run, don't run. I'm going to pause. I am not, don't hear me saying, go endure abuse. That is not what I'm saying. I am not telling you, if your husband beats you, if your wife hits you, or you're abused, I am not saying go endure abuse. This was a different world, and Hagar had nowhere to go but out into the desert and die. Okay? It's a different scenario. So don't hear me telling you you have to go back to an abusive situation. In fact, I would encourage you very differently than that. And we here at church have helped people break out of abusive situations. And if you find yourself in a situation like that, we can help you. I can help you with that. So that's not what I'm saying. But there's tremendous wisdom in this. Endure a little longer. The message that God had for Hagar, endure a little longer. Parents, endure a little longer. Your kids are children, the time that they're children is so short. It flies like that. 1 minute, you're walking them to school, kindergarten, and the next minute, you're less than 4 weeks away from graduation, like that. Anybody feel that one? I do, today. I mean, it goes so fast. But when the kids are young, when they're really young, there's all kinds of resources for you. There's all kinds of help available to you. There's all kinds of, I think of MOPS, or what's going to be next year, I think it's going to be MomCo. And by the way, they're selling plants out in the lobby right after church, $5 a piece. Support them. But MOPS is a tremendous resource. There's all kinds of resources in the schools. There's all kinds of resources in the community for young children, parents with young children. But as your kids get older, the resources get fewer, and things get harder. And the questions that your kids are asking are harder, and the struggles that they're having are harder, and the things that they're getting into are much more difficult. And a lot of parents quit parenting before the kid is done, before the kid is raised. And my encouragement to you, parents, endure. Re-engage. Parent them right up to the end. Spouses must endure too. You know, marriage is great most of the time. But there's times that it's not so great, right? You marry somebody and you're so excited and you're starting your life with them and it's beautiful and it's wonderful and everything is great and you have this dream, and then it gets hard. And it does get hard. And we have this idea, this fairy tale idea, that it should be perfect all the time, but it's not perfect with anybody, especially because you're in it. Actually, I'm speaking about me. I'm in it, right? And so it's not perfect. And there's going to be days that are wonderful and beautiful and great, and there's going to be days that are hard, and you have to endure those days. And there might be a year that is good and a year that was, well, you just got to endure that year. But endurance is everything, because if you don't endure to the end, you'll never know. And so endure. So the message for Hagar, that actually applies to more than parenting and marriage. It applies to a lot of things in our lives. But the message to Hagar, endure a little longer. So Hagar died to herself and went back and gave birth to this son, Ishmael. When I graduated seminary, we moved to Houston, Texas, and took on the youth ministry at this church in Pasadena. And one of the moms there had recently gone through a divorce, and she had a son who was just moving into his freshman year in high school. Tremendous kid, and she, her husband had left her and had an affair, and now was starting a family with another woman. And so this was hard. It was really hard. But she said this. This was our first interaction with her, and she said, I've determined that I am not going to date anyone until he's raised. Now, don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying you should never date somebody. That is not what I'm saying. Her choice was, I am going to raise my son first. I am not going to bring another man into the house until he's raised, because it's already complicated enough. And he doesn't need the drama of my dating life. That was her choice, okay? But I had nothing but tremendous respect for her to choose that. To choose that she wouldn't do that because she had 4 years to serve, right? To endure 4 years to raise her son until he moved out, went off to college or whatever. And so she did. And she also said this. She said, and I've chosen that I will never say one negative word about his dad. I will never say one negative thing to him. He will never hear me complain about him. He'll never hear my frustration or my hurt or my pain. I won't do it. I will say those things to other people, but he will not hear those things from me, because he doesn't need my baggage when it comes to his dad. He has enough stuff to work through. So she endured. Now, again, I'm not trying to tell you what to do with your dating life or anything like that, but I am telling you endurance is everything. Endure just a little longer. That's what God is telling Hagar. So Hagar returns to Abram, and she gives birth to this son, Ishmael. And as it would happen, God would now come to Abram and change his name to Abraham. And he would come to Sarah, and her name would now move from Sarai to Sarah. And she would become pregnant, and she would have a child. Now we're at Genesis 21, verse 1. The Lord kept his word and did for Sarah exactly what he had promised. She became pregnant, and she gave birth to a son for Abraham in his old age. This happened at just the time God had said it would. And Abraham named the son Isaac. 8 days after Isaac was born, Abraham circumcised him as God had commanded. Abraham was 100 years old when Isaac was born. That would make Ishmael 13 or so, 12, 13 years old. Skip down now to verse 8 of Genesis 21. When Isaac grew up and was about to be weaned. All right, so you're going to have to help me out because I don't even know. When do you wean a baby? Three or so? All right, so Isaac hasn't really grown up. He's grown up a little, right? He's 3, all right? When Isaac grew up and was about to be weaned, Abraham prepared a huge feast to celebrate the occasion. But Sarah saw Ishmael, the son of Abraham, and her Egyptian servant Hagar making fun of her son, Isaac. Stop there just a second. What are they doing? Make fun. Boy, that Isaac's a funny-looking kid. What are they doing? Why are they making fun of a baby, right? They're making fun of him. I don't know what that was, but... So she turned to Abraham and demanded, get rid of that slave woman and her son. He is not going to share the inheritance with my son, Isaac. I won't have it. This upset Abraham very much because Ishmael was his son. But God told Abraham, do not be upset over the boy and your servant. Do whatever Sarah tells you, for Isaac is the son through whom your descendants will be counted. But I will also make a nation of descendants of Hagar's son, because he is your son too. So Abraham got up early the next morning, prepared food and a container of water, and strapped them on Hagar's shoulders. Then he sent her away with their son. And she wandered aimlessly in the wilderness of Beersheba. When the water was gone, she put the boy in the shade of the bush, and then she went and sat down by herself about 100 yards away. I don't want to watch the boy die, she said, as she burst into tears. Here again, 14 years have passed, maybe 15 somewhere. And she finds herself in the same place. She's wandering in the desert. But now, she can't carry the baby in her womb. Now she has a son, and he's about to die. They're dehydrated, they're out of water, they're in the desert, and they're desperate, and she can't bear to sit beside him and watch him die. And so she says this out loud. She says, I don't want to watch the boy die. Who's she talking to? I don't want to watch the boy die. My assumption is she's talking to God. Verse 17 of Genesis 21. But God heard the boy crying, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven. Hagar, what's wrong? Do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying as he lies there. Go to him and comfort him, for I will make a great nation from his descendants. And God opened Hagar's eyes, and she saw a well full of water. She quickly filled her water container and gave the boy a drink. And God was with the boy as he grew up in the wilderness. He became a skillful archer, and he settled in the wilderness of Paran. His mother arranged for him to marry a woman from the land of Egypt. God heard the boy crying. God heard Hagar crying. And God hears you when you cry also. When you're overwhelmed, when everything seems to be going wrong and you are desperate and there seems to be no answer, God hears your cry, your disappointment, your frustration, your heartbreak, your fear, your desperation, all of it. God hears it. God is closer than we imagine. And he will provide water or the resources or whatever it takes in the journey. But when you say that, what if God doesn't provide? This is not a message where I'm asking you moms, do better. Moms, you should do better. That is not what I'm saying. You see, mom guilt is a real thing. It's real. And you're not going to get mom guilt from me because you're already trying to carry the world on your shoulders. But there are a couple of takeaways that I want to point to as the band makes their way back up. And that's this: God's timing is not our timing. God's timing is not our timing. Second, don't force things. Because typically when we force things, they go sideways. And as we look at Sarah and how she forced this, and Ishmael and Isaac, and we point to the historical events and how these two people groups went their separate ways, and we point to even in the Middle East how there's enmity between these two groups, even to this very day, between the Jews and the Arabs to this very day. Don't force things, because when we force things, they go sideways. But the encouragement is this: endure a little longer. God hears your cries. Take them to him in prayer. Take your disappointment, your desperation, your child. Take these things to God. He will not abandon you. In fact, Jesus said one of the last things he told his followers, I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. Sometimes God's timing seems so slow to us, but our task is to trust that he is close and that he will not fail us in the end.